to you by New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity. Hi, this is the most amazing collection I have read so far. I'm a reading-aholic. Dustin Pickering, you know me from Parrot Literary Corner. This is the Literary Parrot, available at Amazon.com and its various affiliates. If you have not seen this collection, it's 249 pages of glorious global literature in a contemporary vein. This covers a lot of subjects from the coronavirus to violence on the streets, to love, to romance. Everything you can imagine is in this collection, and you should buy it now. I'll tell you why. It's a collection of unique voices from the Literary Parrot. People have been on our show, have participated in this, or have been published on our website, newyorkparrot.com. So please, I implore you, buy a copy. Thank you, and please return to the
watching the New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Hi, welcome to New York Parrot's Literary Corner. I'm Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host. Today we have Kate Cumiskey, who is a writer, painter, and social justice activist in coastal Florida. Her work appears regularly in fine literary and peer-reviewed journals. Cumiskey and her husband, Mikkel, work together to meet the needs of homeless teenagers and young adults by housing them and promoting public awareness, including founding an independent student cadre at a local high school. She is recognized by the state of Florida Department of Education as a distinguished educator through the Best and Brightest Scholarship Program and as a pioneering autism advocate by the National Association of Social Workers. This book, the Women Who Gave Up Their Vowels, is her fourth book. Thank you for joining us today. Kate, how are you doing?
I'm well. Thank you for asking, and thank you for inviting me. This is exciting.
Wonderful. It's a fascinating title there, The Women Who Gave Up Their Vowels. What does that mean, and how does the book engage with that meaning?
Well, thanks for asking about that. You're the first person who's asked at a reading or anything else about the title, although it's funny, I do have some problems sometimes with people thinking it's the women who gave up their vows. So I have to be careful to enunciate. This book is dedicated to my sister, who is Carol Ann Davis. She directs the MFA in creative writing at Fairfield. And it's really, there's quite a bit of dialogue with my sister, myself, and our mother, who passed away a few years ago. And one of the things I miss most about my mother is her Southern accent. She was from Atlanta. The women who gave up their vows would be myself and my sister. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, when my father was with the space program in Huntsville, and my dad was from Mississippi. My mother was from Atlanta, and I had a very deep Southern drawl. And when I married very young at 19, my husband and I moved to California, and I trained the Southern out of my voice, because where we were living in Monterey, California, I spoke, like I said, I had a deep drawl, and no one would speak to me. My husband was from the Midwest, and he had that sort of accent, and I had that deep Alabama drawl. And so I trained it out of my voice, and I kind of miss it. And I do dialogue quite a bit about that in some of the poems. And my sister has been in the Northeast for so long as a poet that her voice has changed as well. Although she's a Floridian, she was born in Florida, and the accents here are not the same as in the deep South. Florida is much more diverse than Alabama that way with voice. So I kind of miss my voice.
Right. Sounds like we have a lot in common. I was born in Decatur, Georgia, right there on top of Atlanta, and I spent a lot of time in the South in Atlanta and Georgia and Alabama, and so yeah, I know that accent very well. I like it too. I happen to like it.
I used to be able to tell what part of Atlanta you were from your voice. My mother grew up on Mell Avenue in Decatur, so.
Oh wow, yeah, I was born right there in Decatur.
Wow.
Many 40 years ago, to be exact. 40 years,
Right.
January. Yeah, it's interesting. I have a lot of interesting stories about my family in Atlanta, which yeah, it's quite an interesting place.
I love Atlanta.
So I'm curious. Also, the image on the front captivated me of the book. So where did that cover image come from?
Well, and speaking of which, can I hold it up to
Yeah,
the
sure.
camera?
That's an interesting image.
This is my mother at 19 years old.
Okay.
And after she passed away, I found this portrait in the trash. And I asked one of my brothers, who is the executor, if I could have it. And he said, sure. It had been torn up my entire childhood. And I guess whoever had cleaned the house had thrown it away. But my father had that portrait painted of my mother in Paris, I believe in 1950. And so after I looked at these poems as a group and worked with the publisher and, put the book together, I found this and I thought that's just the perfect image for this book. And it's kind of haunting.
Right.
And then I gave it to the artist the photographer who was going to shoot the cover for me. And he had known my mother all of his life. So he kept it about 6 weeks and cleaned out his fireplace and placed that frame and portrait in his fireplace and shot the cover.
Oh wow, it's very captivating, and I'm curious. Like, obviously, these are these confessional poems that are in the book. Is that why you chose the really personal kind of cover design for it?
No, I chose the cover later in the development of the book. In fact, during the second revision, and again, my mother never gave up her vowels. She had that, Decatur accent her whole life, but she was gone. And some of these poems do deal with her death and that process, and later, and of course, myself missing her voice. But the pandemic came in the process of this book. And so when in the revision of the book, I did take some poems out and add some poems about this very, very dark time that we're still experiencing now, especially here in Florida, where things are so insane politically.
Yeah.
And it's so bad with COVID. And so this image to me sort of brought a little bit of that about lost people. The final poem of the book ends on on the pandemic. So
Hmm.
just thinking about things lost. And
Okay. So
yeah.
speaking of the pandemic, and you're working with homeless youth, and how are people in Florida coping with these mechanisms that are going on that are, worsening the pandemic, and how are they just coping in general psychologically with the effects that are going on with all this just disastrous stuff happening right now?
That's a really great question. Of course, like I said, the book is maybe a couple of years old. My
Okay.
work with the homeless has given way necessarily during the pandemic to working. I have always been a K through 12 teacher instead of teaching higher ed, so we could stay in Florida.
Mhm.
And I have been working with educators, teachers, parents, students, 10, 12 hours a day trying to solve safety issues. So people are scared, people are angry. Masking and common sense has been politicized
Right.
quite a bit here. So my work these days, and in fact, I'm in my office today and I have a conference later today. I have an office where I intended to write, but I've been working on advocacy for the last 6 months or so.
Mhm.
Getting teachers vaccinated, helping them. I spent a lot of time scheduling vaccines for people who couldn't find them, finding vaccines early in the vaccination period. Right now, my work concentrates on helping parents of children who can't be vaccinated find alternative ways to educate their children. So things like childcare are an issue for some parents of, say, a 6-year-old who they don't want to be in face-to-face schooling right now, but they don't have any way to educate their child at home. So helping with those kind of issues. That's what
So,
we're doing.
wow, that's a lot of work. Do you still
It
find
is.
time to write in that process? You sit down in the evening maybe and jot a few ideas down, or
I've been making myself write. And it's interesting that you ask about, what's the state of mind. People are pretty frantic these days in Florida. Um, and very polarized. And I tend to write on weekend mornings. I'll get up, I have a routine. I make myself go to the desk, I make myself go to the computer and do some writing. So I have been getting some poems out. I have a couple of book contracts right now, so I've been doing some nonfiction work, and the
Mhm.
publisher makes me stick to that schedule. We have a regular Thursday call, and I have my tasks set out, so I am getting some work done. I'm very organized with work. Have to be.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, what is the nonfiction concern?
I have, let's see, I have a novel that's coming out with Finishing Line Press next year. That's a social justice novel. That's in the can. Um, I don't want to give away too much because it's a brand new contract, but the nonfiction book is one that I am helping a publisher put together. It's an anthology of perspectives on their childhood of people who grew up here in this small town, New Smyrna Beach, Florida,
Mhm.
whose parents worked at Kennedy Space Center. So it's like space stories told from the
Huh?
perspective of the grown children. I've published a couple, so those are going to be in the anthology. So 2 of my stories are going to be in there, and I'm helping him with that. And that's kind of a pleasure to work on.
Oh, it sounds fun.
A lot of fun, yeah.
So, in
So
what ways can literature engage and raise awareness to justice issues, and why do you think raising awareness is important?
wow, that's a really, really good question. I think raising awareness can save lives. I
Okay.
really do. I had quite a few people come out to um, the um, the book launch for the
Mhm.
women who came up with their for the women who gave up their vows, came out to the book launch, who said they normally don't read poetry. So I read some of the poems, exactly like you're asking about, some engaged poems, some poems speaking out, saying things we do not say. I even have a poem that is called "The Things We Do Not Say." And I think in literature, there are so many things that bind us as humans that we share that we never speak of.
Right.
And I think speaking of those in a time of worldwide pandemic can help save lives, can help people hang on, can help them stay engaged, can help them realize you're not alone in this.
Right.
I think that's really critical to showcase our shared humanity. And especially those things that we don't discuss. I mean, there are things we don't talk about, and, it's out there. Maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. But do you want me to give you an example?
Sure, why not? We'll get an example.
Okay, this was almost the title poem of the book. It's called Candor. And
Right.
I'll just read you a couple of lines out of it.
Right.
And I can drop the F-bomb in this broadcast.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Write a poem about the dried flowers hanging from the curtain rod. Write your mother, your sister's ex-boyfriend, your hemorrhoids. Write one honest politician you've shaken hands with, then write Trump. Write about the 11th grade American history teacher who wanted to fuck you. Write the zoology teacher who raped your best friend. Write developers from Miami and New York raping the estuary. So that's the first part of the first poem in the book. And I think talking about some of these things, as personal as hemorrhoids, as polarizing as a politician that you can't stand, I think talking about these things is a step toward admitting our shared humanity.
Right.
And
can bridge people, I think, too.
I think so
there's a
too.
lot more in common than we realize, and we do
Right.
tend to either ignore or not talk about those things as much. It seems like we like to be in conflict, or we're just maybe a little ashamed of ourselves, and I mean, those are
Sure.
sort of things that are shameful, and that we don't really want to open up a conversation about
Right.
certain things that are, especially related to the body, and
Right.
mentioned like sexual abuse there, and then some drives that we have that we don't entirely understand sometimes, but feelings we
Sure.
don't understand, so those are definitely things that I think literature is very good to address. And you in books, you can read a book, you don't have to, it's not forced on you most of the
Right.
time, and because you're studying it, and in that case, it's something that you come to, and as you're reading, you're raise your own awareness to these various problems in humanity and what's going on. And I think also it can, I mean, do you think it could maybe, if someone was to read a story, let's say they're a really hardcore bigot, and they read a story of a gay person who faced a lot of trauma, and trying to understand themselves, and maybe they relate to that and say, hey, I have more in common with this than I would have assumed, or maybe I should find some other avenue for my frustration than being a bigot. I don't know of any personal stories. I've never run across anything like that. I don't know about you. It's hard to
That's
change people's
a great
minds.
question. Well, I think that's really important. I mean, I taught high school English for many years, and I think, and that's a huge mission of mine.
Right.
Bigotry. I think a lot of people, I think some very progressive people don't understand what bigotry is. In
Right.
fact, I had a big argument with a friend recently who was just who doesn't live in this country, who was screaming and moaning about Floridians and the United States and Americans. And I'm like, stop, you're lumping everyone together. And that is the definition of bigotry. Don't speak about people and throw away an entire group of people like Floridians or Texans right now.
Mm-hmm.
You have to take people individually, even when things are overwhelming.
Right.
And one of the ways I found, I think you have to lead people to an understanding of their biases. And sometimes I think shock does work. I have another poem in the book. My mentor was Robert Creely, a poet. I don't know if you're familiar with his work.
Yeah, absolutely. Love Robert Creely.
Bob actually, I was going to show you this. He wrote his last poem for me.
Oh, wow.
One of my treasures. It's Dover Beach Again. That he wrote right before he died. And Bob really helped me. Bob was baldly blunt. I mean, he was a wonderful guy, but he just didn't have time for prevarication. And very, very honest in his work and in his life. And I have a poem in here, I'll read you the very first, the epigraph.
Mhm.
Let me see if I can find it. It's epigraphed. It's the poem I said, The Things We Do Not Say, and I epigraph it with a line of Bob's from the poem Memory. I remember it was a urologist told me how to strip the remaining pee from my penis using my fingers pressure just back of the balls. That's blunt. That's putting yourself on the page about getting old and about things
Mhm.
if we're lucky enough to get old, we may face and have to deal with. And I think what helps people be cured of their biases is experience.
Yeah.
And you talk about,
Being
someone
vulnerable.
persecutes someone that's gay.
Hmm.
And then what if their grandchild that they love very much turns out to be gay and gets persecuted? That's going to teach them pretty quickly.
Right.
So, I think a lot of it is experiential, that kind of
Hmm.
learning. I hope so. I hope people learn.
Yeah, I would think so. I think that people learn more as they develop as a person also. And I'm not sure if we improve over our lives, or if it does take a little bit of a shock, to like having a gay child, or some experience that sort of wakes you up and makes you realize, hey, I've been wrong for a long time.
Right.
Right. So what is your story behind meeting Robert Creely? I'm curious about that.
Oh, Bob, well, that involves my sister as well. Obviously, I'm close to my sister. We're both writers. We have that in common. And we're also the only two females in our family. We have 5 brothers, as far as siblings go. There is a wonderful artist colony here in New Smyrna called Atlantic Center for the Arts. It's really world class. And many, many years ago, I was complaining to my sister that as a poet, I had no community here. And she said, What about ACA? And I said, What's that? And I applied blindly to get in. I just saw there was a poet coming. I applied and I got in to study with Robert Creely. And
Okay.
it changed not just my life, my husband's life, my children's lives. We have 4 sons. I got in and worked with Robert for 3 weeks out at Atlantic Center for the Arts. I believe it was 1993. And we became fast friends right away. It was an amazing experience for me. And I became involved in the community at Atlantic Center for the Arts. And I actually went to my husband and said, I had a bachelor's in special education from University of Florida, and I'm a teacher and special ed person. I said, I want to move the entire family and get an MFA in creative writing. And Bob helped me with that, went to the University of North Carolina, stretched my program from 3 to 4 years, did that, and really became much more serious about my writing just from meeting Bob. And while I was there and we stayed in touch quite a bit. While I was there at University of North Carolina, Wilmington, I invited Bob to come and do an intensive there, and he did, and it was pretty much his final. He found out he was sick
Hmm.
while he was there, and then died shortly after. But he was just an incredible mentor for me, just terrific friend, very generous person with his time.
We're going to have time to take a break here, and we'll come back and you can read a couple of poems for us. So
Okay.
appreciate your time on the show. So
Well,
we'll be
thank
back
you.
in shortly.
I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, me too. Hi, this is the most amazing collection I have read so far. I'm a reading-aholic. Dustin Pickering, you know me from Parrot Literary Corner. This is the Literary Parrot, available at Amazon.com and its various affiliates. If you have not seen this collection, it's 249 pages of glorious global literature in a contemporary vein. This covers a lot of subjects from the coronavirus to violence on the streets to love, to romance. Everything you can imagine is in this collection, and you should buy it now I'll tell you why. It's a collection of unique voices from the literary parrot. People who have been on our show, have participated in this, or have been published on our website, newyorkparrot.com. So please, I implore you, buy a copy. Thank you, and The Literary Corner, brought to you by New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity. And we're back. Thank you very much for joining us, Kate. Let's hear a couple of poems.
Okay, how about one from the book and a new one?
Okay, let's do it.
Does that sound good? This poem, Winter, I have to admit, is one of my favorite from the book. And
Okay.
Winter is a young woman. You know, I worked with homeless teenagers, and we were blessed to have Winter living with us for 3 years. So, Winter, and this is a direct address to my husband. He is the you in the poem. Winter, you watch a program about glacier lilies and pikas. I tried to write a poem about all the homeless kids, but they weren't homeless. They lived here, who slept on that couch over the years. It fails. How do you pen hoarded food, stomach issues, the elegant dance of dinner time, downplaying parenthood? You flip the channel, draw the line at bison fucking. Instead, it's salmon who beat themselves bloody on river stones, refraction, a paintbrush of remove. How thoughtless spawning. There's no sheltering our issue from the wild, wild world. So, and then I'm working on a new book of poems called Trying to Get to Hot Coffee, Alabama. The town of Hot Coffee, Alabama doesn't exist. It's Hot Coffee, Mississippi. So that title comes from my brother and I getting lost looking for this town. But this poem is called Hesitation Wounds. And a little background on this. My husband was for many years a firefighter and paramedic. So a lot of his lexicon is those terms. Hesitation wounds. By the time I was 4, most of my modifiers were science-based, rocket science, astronomical in nature. With you, 40-some years into marriage, street medicine is how we enter the world together. Once in a great while, because who can truly marry without bruising, impact? The two lexicons cross, merge, muddling. Biker who died in your arms of trauma incompatible with life on North Tropical Trail reached escape velocity. And Sam's attempt to please Jessica and her family driving through Shiloh to the Cape at 4 every morning, Kennedy Parkway's security gate, gators and wild pigs, was probably little more than hesitation wounds. So that's a new one from my new book, Trying to Get to Hot Coffee, Alabama.
Interesting. That's quite an interesting poem, and I like the way that you talk about lexicons and people having different vocabularies based on their profession.
Sure.
That's quite interesting. And it is an interesting phenomena. It's like we develop these little, I don't know what you would call it, linguistic, tricks to sort of differentiate ourselves from one profession to the next. I mean, the lawyers have theirs, the
Right.
medical people have theirs. That's pretty interesting. That was an interesting poem. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And in a family, you develop this intimate language that somebody listening
True.
would be like, what?
Right. Your own inner joke, inside jokes and everything. Right. Yeah. So I'm curious, you had a social justice novel called, I believe it's called Anna.
It is.
How long did it take you to write that, and how does it engage with social justice?
Well, if I can't really give away, well, what it is it's a social justice novel disguised as kind of light ladies literature, and it's about a 58-year-old widow that moves from New Jersey to a small Florida town based on my town. And she uses her widowhood and people's discomfort with widows to kind of hide in plain sight. She has a big secret.
Okay.
And the way it kind of does a little bit of forcing what you were speaking about earlier, self-examination on the part of the reader, because there's an appendix in the back of the book, and every single character that walks across the stage, even if it's somebody she runs into in the grocery store, has a character sketch in the appendix that delves deeper into who that person is. And you can either read the book without ever looking anyone up and it hangs together, or you can dig a little deeper and find out about that person if they
Right.
you. So that's kind of how that it's sort of doubly a social justice piece. You can engage and do some self-examination on your prejudices and your beliefs that you bring to reading such a book, or you can just read it light literature and be shocked at the ending when you find out Anna's secret.
Interesting. So where did you get the idea of having sort of that double book, you know, the appendix with the character analysis in it?
Well, I live in a community that's very rich and very poor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's unbelievable wealth here. And my kids, my sons, who are all surfers, they're grown now, young men, would always work in the restaurants over on the beach. And we would go over and pick them up. And then as we're driving home at 1 o'clock in the morning, we're also picking up people walking to the mainland, dishwashers, the unseen populace that supports the wealth that floods the town, ruins the town really, because they tear down houses, build these huge things. So that's kind of where I came up with showcasing the hidden people in a place like this. I really wanted to, but I wanted to do it using a character that you would think is one of the rich people that moved from New York and use Florida as a tax shelter, which happens a lot, because if you build a home here and you live in New York particularly, and you live 6 months and a day here, you don't have to pay property taxes in New York. And that has a horrible environmental impact on Florida. There's multiple negative impacts. So that's kind of where that came from. And I wrote it in the middle of the night. My husband calls it my insomnia book. Because my nonfiction and my poetry make a lot more noise when I'm writing. When I was writing Anna, I just sat down and typed in the middle of the night, So I didn't disturb anybody.
Right. So how long did it take to complete that?
Oh gosh, I started it 7 years ago this month, September. It took me about 2 years to finish the book.
Okay.
And I did have a contract that I canceled. I had a publisher for that particular book whose editor wanted to change it into a romance, and it's not a romance. So I canceled that contract, and then Finishing Line was interested in it after I had the women who gave up their vows published with Finishing Line. So they're publishing it as is. It's not a
Take a
romance.
take a minute to thank our viewers out there. It's just going live, so I just wanted to say hello
Oh,
to everybody. So hello, everybody. I hope you guys are enjoying the conversation. So, what ways can social justice engage with other forms of justice, like, say, criminal justice, environmental justice, economic justice?
I think that's a really important question. I think the way it's hard for me to speak to in a macro kind of way, kind of in my world. What I like to do is, because writing is kind of my talent, and I'm very logical. Like my dad was a rocket scientist. He was the guy that came up with the shuttle. But so I have quite a bit of that in me. I'm very logical. I like to kind of engage people and help them with getting things out in writing. So I like to work behind the scenes quite a bit. I'd much rather be invisible and helping, the local people with their push to conserve the estuary here and helping other social justice activists who are willing to get up and speak against DeSantis and the mask bans and willing to get up and speak at the school board meetings and things like that. I do a lot of the writing.
Okay.
So I hook up with people and just work together as a team for some of these social justice things. For the homeless teens that I still do a lot of that, preparing a lot of documents, reaching out with lawyers. I do work with, I actually have an office. My office is in a legal office with several lawyers. And what I'll do is I'll come up with some lingo that will help engage different people and get them together, and have the lawyers send it out. And it's effective so far. I mean, it just
Interesting.
works so much. So lately, one of the things we've gotten done is we got the COVID dashboard here in Volusia County for our school system was not going to put up their numbers. We managed to get that done. We get very, very specific things done. I'm working with a group of 8 activists, and I'm kind of the voice behind those people, and I'm not speaking out. I'm helping them find their words. Let me put it that way.
Right. So I guess this can testify to to the importance of writing in general. It's and being able to communicate effectively with a broad range of people. Writers are supposed to be able to do that kind of thing. They're flexible in their ability to talk with, you can talk with a variety of people on different levels and reach them at their baseline, and come to them on their level and in their way of talking and speak to them. And
you're a good interviewer. And I think
thank you.
having those interview skills is critical to changing things. Being
Right.
able to have those specific questions to guide an interview. So I do a lot of interviewing and pulling things out of people and then saying, here, this is what I captured, do with it what you want, kind of a thing.
Right.
Them shape their own words, but helping them to find those words, like interviewing, that's a crucial skill. I'd say it's easily as important in my world as writing is, as actually writing the words.
Absolutely. Yeah, you let people be themselves, especially when you're talking with poets and writers, you want them to feel comfortable saying what they think needs to be said. So you get a picture of the humanity, as we spoke earlier, about people being human, and not being so embarrassed of ourselves and
Right.
shameful. And, once we reach that level, it's like really good communication happens.
Right, exactly. So, and I know there are some writers who just need to get their stuff out. I need to engage.
Yeah, that's what I like too.
Yeah, I need to engage. I need it to be a conversation. If someone reads one of my poems, what I love is when something new happens that their reading brings to the poem, their interpretation. I don't want to just tell my story. I want to make a connection.
Right, absolutely.
So, yeah, that's critical to me. Sure.
Excellent. So thanks for joining us today. And do you have any few words of advice or some encouraging words for viewers out there as well as writers? Just to say something nice to them to keep us going, keep us alive here.
I'd like to thank you for spending the time, taking the time. I'd like to thank you, Dustin, for this work you do. I think it's critical. I think it's vital. And I think engaging in this way is can be life-saving. Artists in their lives more than any other discipline. Poets are the most at risk for suicide of any writers. So I think that engagement, especially in times like these, is life-giving for sure.
Absolutely.
So I think if you're out there and if you feel isolated, I think it's really important to reach out and also to look out. When I work with poetry students, I tell them, look out, write outside yourself. Don't write about you. When I first work with students, I'll smash a piece of rotten fruit and I'll have them write about that. I'm like, just look at anything and write something out there if you're feeling too alone. Anything, right? Anything about something outside yourself. And that helps you engage too.
Interesting. That's a good way of looking at it. So, do you have any people you'd like to thank or some shout outs you'd like to give
Oh
out
my
to?
gosh, my husband Michael, who's amazing, follows me all over, supports my poetry, my students, my sister, who's a fantastic person, and my publishers at Finishing Line have been amazing. They have just been so terrific to work with, and I want to keep working with them.
Mm-hmm.
My new publisher, George Foote, he's done one book for me at a small house, Silent E in Florida. He's fantastic to work with as well. And of course, you. Thank you for
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a really pleasant conversation and an interesting set of values we've imparted to the world, I think, and I think it's been a really authentic conversation and very fun and enjoyable. Thank you so much.
Send me a snail mail. See, there's my Southern coming out.
Uh-huh.
Mail address, and I'll send you a copy of the book.
Okay, definitely. I'll get in touch with you about that later on today.
Yeah.
So this has been New York Parrot's Literary Corner. Thank you guys for joining us out there live. Remember, you can leave comments on our show during the show, so please do that and subscribe to our YouTube. You'll be notified when we go live, and you can get on there and watch us, and we can have interesting conversation with you as well as with our viewers and with our guests, and you can ask questions live, and we can support this program through paypal.me/nyparrot. That's our PayPal handle. If you want to get in touch with us there with some funds for our program, we could definitely use it. And for me, you can get in touch with me if you want to be on the program as a guest, or if you have some music you'd like to share. We would love to feature it on this program. You can get in touch with me at Literary Corner at newyorkparrot.com. Definitely would love to hear from you. I'm not at all intimidated by people getting in touch with me, so don't be afraid. We're looking for musicians, we're looking for poets, creative minds, creative writers, all sorts of people out there doing creative work, and we'd love to hear from you. We're not at all shy about getting you on this program. We're looking to book next week, so please get in touch and don't be afraid. And again, if you're feeling down right now, we're all having some trouble. Just keep up. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep writing, and be in touch with us for conversations. And we definitely want to engage the audience out there. So please be in touch with us. This is Dustin Pickering. This has been the New York Parrot Literary Corner. Have a good afternoon. Hi, this is the most amazing collection I have read so far. I'm a reading-aholic. Dustin Pickering, you know me from Parrot Literary Corner. This is the Literary Parrot, available at Amazon.com and its various affiliates. If you have not seen this collection, it's 249 pages of glorious global literature in a contemporary vein. This covers a lot of subjects from the coronavirus to violence on the streets, to love, to romance. Everything you can imagine is in this collection, and you should buy it now. I'll tell you why. It's a collection of unique voices from the Literary Parrot. People have been on our show, have participated in this, or have been published on our website, newyorkparrot.com. So please, I implore you, buy a copy. Thank you, and The Literary Corner, brought to you by New York Parrot TV, the voice.